All right, everyone. Gary here. And yes, I'm very overdressed. It just came from my 4-year-old daughter's dance rehearsal. I'm actually in the dance and I'm lazy. I didn't really feel like changing, so I just want to knock this out. All right, so welcome to now the third section in this 100% free course where we're going to cover the app that we created in the mockup process using Adobe XD, and then also the app that we created in Vue.js. We're going to take that app now and we're going to see what it takes to create that app now in Facebook's React. Now, React is a JavaScript library that's there simply for the view portion of an app. All right, so if you're just hopping in, feel free to follow along with the course at the very beginning. You can also download the project files, which are going to contain the HTML and CSS that I will be pasting in. We covered that process of typing all that out in the Vue.js portion of the course, in case you're wondering. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. Oh, but real quick, before we begin, make sure you check out my site, coursetro.com, where you're going to find a bunch of courses on modern design and development. A lot are free, and the others you can access for the cost of buying me like a 6-pack each month. That's it. Now, also, it probably wouldn't hurt to subscribe here on YouTube, and be sure to make sure the notifications are turned on. All right, let's get back to it. All right, guys, welcome to this new section of this 100% free course about React versus Angular versus Vue.js. Now, we just covered Vue. Now, in this section, we're going to be covering React. And for those of you who are just kind of hopping into this course from this video, we're sort of here in the middle of the course, just beginning this Vue, or the React section rather. And we just covered Vue. And what we're doing is we're taking this app, which, by the way, we covered the whole design mockup process and prototype process in the very first part of the course within Adobe XD. So you can check out the course page and just take this from the beginning if you wish. But we just finished here this basic landing page in Vue.js, and we're going to recreate this from scratch in Angular and React as well, just to do a comparison. So all it is, just a static page here pretty much. We also have a fact page, which is pulling in these fake question and answers here from an API. So we're going to be doing that with all three frameworks just to get a grip on, how things are just set up from a basic standpoint. Okay, so what we want to do is, as with in Vue, as we already covered, you can add React to an existing project, or you can start from scratch. And you can do so, which is what we're going to do, with the React command line interface called Create React App. All right, so there's not many features associated with the React CLI. Really, it's just for starting projects. Thus, you have the name Create React App. So first, we have to install it. So we're going to run npm install -g create react app. And by the way, if you're also just kind of jumping into this video somewhat as a beginner, then you do need to have npm with Node.js installed. So head on over to nodejs.org if you don't have it and download it, and then reload your console and you'll have access to npm. Okay, so after that, we're going to go ahead and access Create React App in order to create an actual project, because right now we just installed globally, which is the -g flag. Now we have to access it and actually use it to create a React app. So create React app. And based on the previous naming convention from the Vue project, we'll use compare hyphen instead of Vue. We'll use React. Hit enter. All right, it just finished for me. By the way, I paused it. That's why it went so fast. And then we could see, based on the instructions at the top, we can cd into it and then run npm start, which will build out the project and launch it in the browser. And here it is at localhost. What is that? Localhost 3000. All right, so here in the next section, we're going to go ahead and start working on structuring the components and kind of getting a feel for how everything is set up and laid out here in React. Okay, so here in Visual Studio Code, you can use whatever code editor you want. Here is the project that we just created, and we're in the Compare React folder. Okay, so somewhat of a familiar setup based on Vue.js, and it's also pretty similar when it comes to an Angular project. We have our node modules folder here because we're using Node.js for this, which all three use. We have our public folder here. We don't have to worry about anything in there, but all of our code will reside here in source. And as you can see, it's very simple. The CLI creates just 7 files here initially, and one thing that's a little bit strange to me is that there's no folder organization. For instance, we have a logo graphic just stuck in here with over here. It would have been a little bit better if they could create an assets folder off the bat, but really first world problems, right? Not a big deal. So the main files that we need to worry about and all your components, they're just declared in just typical JavaScript files. So .js right here. We'll see we also have an index.js here. And this is what really helps get the project loaded up. We could see that we have a React DOM, we have a render, and we have our app ID passed in. And this is in reference to the component right here, app.js. All right, so the name of it, of course, is class app, and then we're exporting app to be used there in index.js. So there's a few differences, although also a lot of similarities when we're comparing these frameworks and libraries to each other. So at the top, which is consistent with all three of them, we have our imports up here. One thing that's pretty and quite different that sets React apart from Angular and Vue is we have the class app extends component. Really for Angular, this sort of thing, I want to say sort of thing, but within your class is really just designated for being solely for your component code. But when we have our class app extending here of a component, we have both the template, which is defined right here within this return. So all your templating, your HTML, although technically this isn't HTML, it is JSX, and I'll discuss that slightly in a bit, goes right here within this return. And then your component logic largely lies outside of render right here. So if you want to call or hook into component life cycles, for instance, you would do it out here. And we will do that once we develop our little landing page app. All right, so also your styling, you simply import your CSS file up top. So in terms of inline styling, that's something that's not done here in React, so we simply import it at the top. Okay, so what we want to do is create, just to bring about more structure. I don't want all of my component files, being relegated into the same directory. We're going to create a folder called components. All right, and inside of components, we're going to create just a few different component folders additionally based on our needs. So let's head on over to Adobe XD so I can show you the layout real quickly once again. All right, and here's the layout that we already designed and already did in Vue. And if we try to think about this in terms of component structure, again, this is going to be the same thing as Vue if you followed along there. First, we have our whole app interface, and this is really where we would structure everything, and we would consider it the actual app, or in other words, this right here. This is the starting point of the app. Going further into that we have our header here, our navigation. We also have a footer. Now these are two elements of our layout that we want to remain the same, and we want to remain present in all pages. So we can create components out of those. And then we have this middle section here, our content section, and this would be the content that's shown, when they're at the home page. And then this inner content here is where they would be shown when they're at, like for instance, a fact page. So there's really 3 different things happening here. We have a header, we have this intersection here, and then we also have a footer. So let's go ahead and create these elements consistent with that. So back when we were working within Vue, we didn't create components specifically for header and footer. We just stuck it right here in not this file because we're working with a different, but in terms of structure, we didn't create components. Here, I'm going to show you how to create components out of those headers and footers just for two different purposes, just to show you how to import or nest in another component, but also to show you how to create two different types of components. One is stateless, which I will explain shortly. So what we want to do is go ahead and create these files real quickly. So the first, rather folder. So the first folder we'll call header. And inside of here, we're going to create a few files. All right, so first, this header is going to be header.js. All right, let's also real quickly create another one. This will be footer, create another one. Oops, we don't want to create it inside of there. We'll create another one for FAQ, and then finally one more for home. Keep on doing that, sorry about that. All right, so we have our 2 pages here for home and footer, or sorry, home and FAQ rather, and then also our header and footer. All right, so the first thing, of course, we'll focus on momentarily is the header section. All right, so what we'll do is in app.js real quickly, we're going to just change things up just slightly here within the template. So I'm going to get rid of everything between this app class tag here. And by the way, when it comes to JSX, you can see there's some slight differences. For instance, when you have a div and you're trying to specify a class, it's not class equals app, it's class name equals app. Very important, otherwise your app will break. All right, so one thing we need to do is import the header. So at the very top, we did create that header file already. So I'm just going to copy this real quick. Actually, we don't even need logo, so I'll just change that real quick. So import header from components, header and header. All right, great. So we'll save that. And inside of, let me take this real quickly, Control A, Control C to copy all. Let's go over here and just paste this in. Now for our header, we're going to get rid of that. And we will also include a header CSS file a little bit later, but we're not going to worry about that for now. All right, so we need to change this here to header. And we also have to export header right here. So inside of here, all I'm going to do is just type in my header and save it. Now let's go back to our app.js, and inside of here, what we want to do is import that header component that we just created. So to do that, it's very simple. We just come in here. We open it up like it's a HTML element essentially. So header, and close it out like that. So we'll save. And this is what the app should look like so far. Very ugly, but let's keep on going anyhow. So we also want to create a footer. So down here, we'll create a footer. At this point, the app will break because we didn't actually create the file. So let's take this, we're going to copy that. And for our footer, let's create a new footer.js. All right, and we're going to paste that in. All right, so remember when I mentioned there's 2 different type of components in React. We have a stateless component. This right here is a stateful component. So you have stateless and stateful. And when it comes to your stateful components, which is what we've been using right here so far, the way they're declared is we import React and component from React. Now, if we want to transform this to a stateless component, then we remove the component import, and we also change this line right here. So the way we do this is instead of class header extends component, we do const footer, the name of our component here, equals function, arrow function, just like that. And this down here also has to change as well. So what we do is close that parenthesis, and then also the bracket right here. And we also do not have a render method there. All right, so now this has been transformed from a stateful to a stateless component. Now, long story short, use a stateful or a stateless component rather when it comes to components that you know aren't going to need any type of access to what's called the state or any type of really functionality. Okay, so for our footer, we know there's nothing really happening in our footer aside from just static template information. All right, so right down here, I'm going to change this to my footer. Okay, and we also have to make sure we export footer. Then we'll go back to our app.js and we're going to import footer. This will be footer. I keep on doing that with my caps lock. Sorry about that, guys. There. Now we can go back to our app. And we have my header and my footer. Now a little bit later on, we're going to, inside of here, put in our routes, which will load our two components, of which being home and FAQ. But before we get to that, in the next section, we're going to focus on integrating our Balma CSS responsive framework. All right, so we'll get started then. Okay, so the next step in order to integrate Balma, which is a CSS frontend framework, is to use npm to install it in order to give our app local access to the Balma framework. Now, this process is the same across all three of the frameworks and libraries that we're using, which is React, Vue, and Angular. So to do that, we're going to head on over to our console, and I'm going to create just a new console window so I don't have to keep on starting or running this npm start command. And by the way, I'm using a console app called CMDER Commander. You can just Google that. And what we'll run here is, oh, by the way, let me get into the correct folder. We'll run npm install Balma and save it as a dependency in our package.json file. And by the way, if you're kind of hopping into this video without watching the previous lessons here in the course, then Balma is just a growing in popularity in terms of being a responsive front-end framework. So I'm starting to like it and use it myself. All right, so now it is saved. So now it has been created here in a folder somewhere in node modules, okay? So actually, I'm going to find that real quickly just to show you one thing real quick. Where were you at? Balma. There we go. You can see Balma comes with just, a straight up CSS extension if you want to import that, which is it's located right here, or a Sass version if you want to use Sass, the preprocessor Sass. So we're going to use Sass because we did that already in Vue. So it requires just a few extra steps to make sure that that works. So by default, when you create a React app here with your create React app command line interface, it's set up just to work with straight up CSS, as we can see. So we have to modify a couple things in our package.json file if we want this to work correctly. So I just pause to bring up here. Let me just show you at the very top. We're here at the create React app GitHub official doc page, and basically this will just give you a few lines that you need to paste in, along with some instructions on how to. Let me click on this. Where is it going? Why is it not going there? There we go. There we go, right here. In terms of what you need to do in order to get Sass compiling up and running. So as it mentions in package.json, we add the following lines to scripts. So we add these two right here. So we'll copy those. We're going to paste them. We'll get rid of the little plus signs here. And then also, if you scroll down on that same page, we'll find that we have to also remove the standard start and build and add these right here. So start and build, we'll go ahead and delete those, paste in with instead this right here. All right, so now we can go ahead and save this. All right, so now we can create an app.sas file, or SCSS if you wish. And I'm going to use SAS extension simply because Balma is set up to work with SAS, so I'll just keep things consistent. So just click on one of these files randomly, create a new one called app.sas. All right, and then inside of here, this is where we're going to actually import the Balma SAS library. All right, so the location, I'm just going to copy this in real quick, is import node modules Balma, balma.sas. And then also Balma is set up to work with Font Awesome. So we're going to import that as well. And Font Awesome is used for icons, quick access to a ton of different icons. All right, so we'll save that. And I'm going to exit out of here, hitting Control C and just hit Y, and then hit the up arrow, hit npm start. All right, so we have an issue here. And that's because we forgot one step, and we need to install. And by the way, I skipped over this when we were at the GitHub page just momentarily. You have to run npm install save as a dev dependency, npm run all. All right, so let's run npm start now. Oh yeah, I keep on doing this. I am horrible. Sorry about that. There's another command that we need to install, or package rather, npm install node sas chokader, and then save that as a dev dependency as well. Yeah, sorry. I promise, when we run npm start again, it is going to work. All right, now we're going to run npm start. There we go. All right, cool. All right, so now we're going to go back to our editor here. And if we click on app.css, we're going to notice that we have our Balma framework imported right here. All right, so the reason it's doing that is because app.sas, it will take this, it will compile it all down to app.css. All right, so we don't really change anything here. We still import, even though we're using SAS, we still import app.css right here. All right, so that's it in terms of integrating our Balma framework. And inside of these folders, by the way, we will create SAS files. And once we save those SAS files, it'll create, from footer.sas, it'll create footer.css. And then inside of footer, for instance, we'll import footer.css to work with the CSS that was compiled from the SAS file. All right, so now in the next section, we're going to focus on the very top of the layout just because it makes most sense. And that will be within our header component here and getting that looking more like this up here. All right, so let's work on this header now. Now, if you follow along with the last section of the course when we created the view app, well, I really don't want to have to rewrite all of the HTML for everything again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that project, the view project, and I'm going to copy the HTML and make it work here in React. So again, if you want, if you want to be able to follow along and kind of understand essentially, all of the HTML process, then watch the view section of this course. All right, so here I have the view, the app.view, and this really has the header portion at the top. I'm going to create, or copy rather, everything from div, nav, hash shadow, all the way down right to here, just above the router view section. So once I do that, I'm going to real quickly create a new file because we're going to copy or replace rather every instance of class and change it to class name. So I'll create a new file. It doesn't matter the name because we're going to delete it. Just going to copy this or paste this in rather. And right here, I'm just going to select class, Control F, and we're going to replace. And we click on this little button right here to class name. And click on this button and it'll change them all to class name as need be. All right, so I'm going to copy that now. Select all and copy, delete that. We'll go ahead and delete that file right there. And now inside of here, take this and paste in everything that we had there. So now it's giving us some issues here because we have this V on click stuff happening right here. That's for view. So we're just going to delete that. And then also delete this V bind right there. All right, cool. So of course this won't work as well because we have router link and that's specific to view as well. So we're just going to delete that right there. So if you have npm start still running on your console and you save that file, this is what it should look like now. Because remember, it doesn't look like it's the actual full navigation. It doesn't have the dark background because we don't have any CSS yet working with that. All right, so what we'll do, let's get our CSS stuff working as well. So what we'll do at the top is we're going to import a file that doesn't yet exist, and that will be header.css. And then we're also create a new file in the same folder called header.sass. All right. And again, this is all simply coming from the previous Vue course, or Vue project rather. I'm just using the same Sass rule sets or CSS rule sets that I created before. So I'm going to paste in this stuff right here. And it's not going to work yet. We have to import our mq.sass file, which we haven't yet created. But at the top, we want to import a file that we're going to create out here. And that's our mediaqueries.sass file. And so this is something that we had set up in the previous project in Vue as well. So out here, I'm just going to click on any of the files and create a new file called mq.sass. And I'm just going to paste in everything that we had there in the previous. So this is just some initial variables that we want access to. And then there's also some mix-ins for responsive CSS, basically, for our viewports right here. So we'll save that. We'll go to here and we'll save that. Notice it will create a header.css file with all that stuff now written. And then over here, we'll save our header.js file too. All right, so now if you save everything, you'll find that if we go to our app here, that it's not really, we don't have our background, even though we set it already. And that's because we're going to go to our app.js and we're going to take our import of this app.css and put it at the top here. And that way it doesn't override the settings that are in our header and our feature footer. So now if we go back after saving that, we'll see that now we have our header working here properly. Okay, so the next step is within our header.js and the template. Remember, we removed the 4 links here. So those links again are basically right here. So in order to get these working properly, we're going to have to set up routing. And we'll sort of work backwards, and we'll just start here in header.js by using the link attribute here. So link to, and this is the URL. Class name is nav item, and sorry about that, and r-item, and this is going to be the home. So again, we don't use regular ahrefs or anything like that. We're going to copy this and we'll paste it 3 times. This is going to be features, about, and fac. This will be simply, oops, we're going to point all 3 to fac because we're not going to bother making all of these pages. Now we also have to import link at the top. So import link, from and React router DOM. So we'll save that. And now it will error as I intended because we do not have React router DOM installed. So we're going to install that real quickly in the console. So we'll come over here, npm install React router DOM, and we'll save it as a dependency. All right, once that's finished, we're going to go back to our project here, and we're going to head out over to our index.js file, and we have to import a browser router from the package that we just installed. So that looks like this right here. So import browser router from our package that we just installed. And then we have to make a couple adjustments here just under the app portion. All right, so we'll tab this in. And this is going to be, we're going to reference what we just imported. So browser router. And the app goes inside of it. Browser router. All right, that looks good. We'll save it. And now we see our links here, which don't work. They don't go anywhere because we haven't set up the routes yet. So let's do that real quick in our app.js. All right, so like I mentioned before, these go straight here in the middle. Okay, so what we do is reference route, which we're going to have to import at the top. And for the home page or just the root page, we're going to set exact to path, to true, and path to just a /. And the component that we're going to load for that URL is the home component. All right, so we haven't yet imported, so we have to import both of those at the top, both the route and home. So we're going to import route from the React router DOM package. And then also, real quickly, I'll just copy this footer. I'm also going to copy and just paste that twice. This is going to be fac from fac, and then also home from home, our footer right there, home. All right, so not all these files are created though. So fact, there's nothing in there, and home's nothing in there. So let me just real quickly create that. So we have our header right here. I'm just gonna, one real quick tip I'm going to show you actually is if we create a file, we'll just call this home.js. Here in Visual Studio Code, if you head on over to this section right here, and you type in React, for instance, you'll see that we have all these different, packages that we can install right here. And we have code snippets. So you can install any of these or some of these, and they'll give you access to certain just shorthand commands. So for instance, we just created a new component. If I type in RSC, this will create a stateless, for instance, React component. So remember I talked about, this type of stateless component. Well, there we go. We just type in RSC and we get that. Well, if we type in RCC, we'll see we have a React component, and this is a stateful component. All right, just a quick tip there. So we'll save this here. I'll just call this here in the middle home, and we'll give this a name of home right here, and also export it. I'll take all this stuff and just copy it. We'll go to our fac page and create a new file called fac.js. And fac here, and here. All right. So now you can see in the browser, if we're at the home page, we'll see it says home now because this is all the content that's inside of our home component. Fac doesn't yet load anything because we haven't imported that into our app.js file. So just underneath this, we're going to reference route. The path is /fac, and then component equals fac. So we'll save that, we'll go back to our project, and there we go. We can now see fac corresponds with fac, and home is over here. All right, great. So now in the next section, we're going to focus on getting this footer down here working. All right, so you can see here we have just a simple footer down here. So let's work on that real quick. So let's go back to our code editor, our Visual Studio Code. And what we're going to do now is come over here to our footer.js. And remember, this is a stateless component. And let's import real quickly our /footer.css, which doesn't yet exist. Save that. Let's also go ahead and create a footer Sass file. All right, so in our Sass file, we don't have much happening. This is all we have happening, just a reference to footer and the icons. So we'll save that. We'll create our CSS file upon saving. All right, so where it says my footer, I'm just going to paste in real quick the HTML that we created in Vue, and I also ran through the process that we covered earlier of replacing the class to class name. All right, so just in here, I'll paste that in like that. We don't have to give it a class name of app or anything like that, so we can delete that and save it. And now our app looks like this. Very cool. So fac and home. All right, so another thing that doesn't work is if we drag this in, our responsive navigation, remember we got rid of all that the view directives to make this click stuff work and show the actual mobile menu. Let's go ahead and make that work real quickly as well. So let's go ahead, extend this back over here. And we're going to head on over to our header.js. So now you may be wondering, if you're new to React, we already discovered so far how we handle, for instance, user events like click events in Vue. Well, how do you handle click events, for instance, in React? All right. So this right here, the span class nav toggle, that is the CSS or the HTML, and CSS is responsible for creating that little hamburger icon menu. So right here, when someone clicks on it, we add on click equals, and then we use our interpolation brackets. And this time we just use a single bracket as opposed to two, which is what you do in Vue and Angular. But in React, it's simply one. And then we reference this dot handle click. And by the way, when it comes to this right here, when it comes to a stateless component, such as in our footer, which is a stateless, we don't have access to this, by the way. Just something to kind of be aware of. Also, well, before I move on to this section over here, we'll go ahead up top and we're going to create our handle click method. So just right here, we'll put in handle click. We reference this dot set state, and then the previous state. Inside of here, we're going to reference is toggle on, and then the previous state is toggle on. All right, so this is going to toggle back and forth. What we need to do first is work within a constructor up here. We pass in our props or properties. In React, we call them props. We run super props. This dot state equals is toggle on, and we set it to false by default. Then also underneath here, this dot handle click equal this dot handle click dot bind and this. So a lot of probably confusing stuff happening right now. Now I'll explain it momentarily though. Looking at this, make sure everything is good to go. All right, so let's save this. real quickly, I got to fix this typo. Now let's save that. And basically what's happening here is on click, it's going to call our handle click method right here. And we're using this.setState, and this is toggling back and forth. It is toggle on from true and false essentially. And so if we ran it now and we clicked it, nothing would happen. That's because this menu right here, we have to add or attach an isActive class onto it based on when this is clicked. All right, so to do that, just after render right here, we're going to create a property called menu active. So let menu active equals this state dot is toggle on. We're using a ternary operator here, so we add the class is active. Otherwise, simply nothing. All right, so then just over here for our class name, what we do is get rid of this, and we're gonna put them in interpolation brackets. And I'm gonna put in what was just there, which was nav right and nav menu. And then space, and then end a single quote, and we put menu active that we just declared up top, like that. So now we'll save it. And if you bring your browser in enough to see this mobile navigation, we click it, and there we go. We have access to our stuff down here, our drop-down navigation. All right, so also, if you recalled, if you follow along on the first part, this changes to an X if isActive is added as well. So let's do that. So we'll just come right here. I'm going to copy this just so we have the basic scaffolding right here. Remember, it's called nav toggle. That's the current class name. So we'll just replace all that with nav-toggle and save. So now we'll go back, click on it, and now it changes to our X and it animates like that. Awesome. Okay, so now obviously the one huge eyesore is this home component, and we want to take that and turn it into this section right here. All right, so that'll be the next section. All right, so we're gonna make this ugliness once again look like this here in the middle for our home component. Now notice there is a graphic here, so we're gonna have to import from the project files a clouds.jpg in an assets folder. All right, so let's go and do that real quick before we start working on our home JS component. So within this source folder, we're going to create a new folder called assets. And here, Visual Studio Code allows you to right click. We can reveal an explorer, and I'm going to simply, from the project files, which you can download, clouds.jpg. Okay, so now let's head on over to our home.js. And again, this is very straightforward. The only thing we're going to be doing here is just defining properties for our heading and subheading, which are right here and here. And the only reason I'm doing that is just to show you basic interpolation. And so we did that with Vue.js, so I want to show you how to do it here as well in React. So just to define those two properties real quickly, very simple. All we're going to do is right after inside of render, we're going to put let heading equals soaring to new heights, and then also let subheading, and we just have some lorem ipsum text here. Very simple. All right, so we'll save that. Now I already did the HTML for this in the Vue, so they would be rather redundant for me to go through that. Again, if you want to see that whole process of how to structure these columns and the layout based on the Balma CSS framework, then just go ahead and watch the Vue section of that, because even when it comes to Angular, I'm not going to retype all that stuff. So I'm going to paste in just the hero section, which is this bit of HTML right here. All right, so for our hero section, if I go ahead and save this, and we take a look at the browser, we will now see that we have soaring to new heights. Now, it doesn't really look like our mockup simply because of two reasons. Well, first, we don't have our CSS set up for this home.js. So let's do that real quick, just so that we can actually see it looking more consistent with our mockup. So import home.css, save it. We'll create a home.css file, or SAS file rather. Let's just head on over. Actually, I have a SAS file already off screen on a separate project. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in real quickly. So again, this is all consistent with what we did with Vue. And again, if you want to see me hand typing all this stuff out, go back to that early portion in the course and save this. And now, there we go. Now it's looking a lot better in terms of being consistent with the prototype that we did. All right, so now let's focus on this content here. So I'll simply just paste in the rest of that. So we'll go back to our home.js. And after this section right here, I'm going to paste in that. Oops, I pasted in the wrong content. 1 second. There, just pasted it again. All right, going to save that, and we'll go back to our content, and here we go. One thing that's looking problematic is the font. It's not actually using our right font. Let me get this in our index.css, see if that helps fix the issue or not. All right, there we go, much better. All right. All right, so the final section here is going to be with our fact page and getting that working. And we're going to use the Axios HTTP client library, which we used in Vue. And I wanted to show how to use it here in React to grab from a public API just some mock fictional question and answers for a fact page. All right, I'll see you then. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that fact page up and running. So again, this looks like this. And so we will grab all of this stuff from an API. So first, we're going to use Axios like I mentioned, and we're going to install it with npm. So install Axios and save. All right, so now let's go over to our fact component, which is fact.js. First, let's get some initial setup done. Typically, we go to our header.js real quick and grab just this import. I'm a little bit lazy. I don't want to type it all out by hand. So fact.css, we'll create a fact.sas file. All right, that looks good. For the fact sas, there's really not much. So what I'll do is just, we don't even need access to the media query import line. So I'm just going to paste this in and save it. You can pause, by the way, and copy this. Otherwise, you can grab it from the Vue project if you followed along there. All right, now let's go back to our fact.js. And so the first thing that we're going to do is I'm just going to paste in some of the template, or all the template stuff rather. Then we'll focus on the logic stuff in terms of grabbing an API object from, or JSON rather, from Axios or with Axios. So what I'll do, just paste right here. All right, so let me just tab these in real quick. So between those two divs that we have going, and what we have is just the just typical stuff is for the fact, and we have a subheading here, and then we have a div class of columns, and in here is where we take the object that we're eventually going to define up here and grab. And this is how in React that you iterate through an iterable in a sense. So everything inside of here is going to be repeated based on this facts property right here, which is going to be JSON. And so for each one of the results, it will spit out this, and we're using interpolation here for a title and a body of the answer in question. Okay, oh, by the way, this should not be here. That was for Vue. All right, cool. So now up here, in order to make all this work, we have to define a constructor again and pass in properties or props. And then we run super props. And by the way, I didn't really describe it before, but when you use super props here, when you want to be able to access this dot props, for example, in the constructor. So after that, we define this dot state equals an object here, and we pass in a property. It's going to be a type of an array. All right. Sorry about that. Just trying to put a semicolon there at the end. And then we access a React lifecycle by component did mount. And in other words, when the component loads, then execute what is ever inside of here. So this is where we have to first import Axios from Axios, which is the package we installed. And then if you followed along for the Vue.js portion, this is almost pretty much identical. So we put axios.get, and then we pass in the URL of the API. So I'm using the JSON placeholder.typecode.com, and we're grabbing the posts right here. And by the way, you can visit this URL just to see what this site's like. It's just, allows you to create or access an API. And then we run response to a constant of facts equals res, the response, data, and then we're going to run slice 0, 10 just to get 10 results, the first 10 results. And then this .set state, we pass in facts. All right, great. So let's save that. We go back to our project, and there we go. We're at our fact page. We'll click on home. All that jazz looks good. Let's go to our fact page. And there we go, the first 10 results. All right, so now you probably have enough to go on, just to ascertain the very basic and standard and core concepts and differences between React and Vue.js. So now we have one more left, which is Angular. So we're going to see, how we construct this same project and how we do these basic things like, handling user events like clicks, and also property and style binding, and then also grabbing information or data from an API. All right, so we're going to be doing all that in Angular.